r/ask Reddit. Deleted by user. I taught math to 5th 8th graders. Had a student who did very well. Always pleasant. Helped others, etc. I began to think about him more when I noticed a pattern in the clothes he wore. The clothes were nice, basic, and clean. So I really just shrugged it off. It had just turned into the holiday season that year, about a week or so before Thanksgiving. And one evening I had to run back to the school to pick up my car as I had went out with some fellow instructors. As I was preparing to leave, I noticed activity near the dumpsters and saw him digging through them, pulling out food scraps from the cafeteria. My heart sank about 1,000 feet. I didn't know what to do. If I were to go up to him, he'd know I knew, and I just didn't know how he would react. I talked with a colleague of mine who knew a social worker. The family had suffered the loss of his dad about 2 years ago, and now his mom was battling cancer. To say they were hanging on by a thread would be an understatement, but the kid hid this from everyone as far as we knew. Finally, we knew we had to do something, so we all waited one evening, and sure enough, he returned. He was scared, ashamed, crying, angry, every emotion you can think of. I do not blame him. We took him to his home and his mom was emotional too. We ordered hot food and a colleague went and got it. And we all spent many hours that evening talking and reassuring them we were there to help. Working with local resources, we got them the help they needed. Food, medical assistance, even local volunteers to come help with some chores around their house. The mom got better thankfully, and the bright young man continued to do well in school and got a scholarship for college when he graduated a few years later. This was 20 years ago. Today, that bright young man works as a mechanical engineer and is still as generous and considerate as ever. His mother, sadly, passed on around 10 years ago. All 3 of his former teachers from that night went to the funeral. I am very proud of him. We still keep in touch and visit often. That is a beautiful story. I'm proud of you. TBH, this was one of the best things I've read. I had a kid, 16, total addict, alcoholic, meth, pills, heroin, really rough childhood. Started smoking crack with his dad at 13. Stepdad committed suicide in front of him at 14. Unimaginable shit in between. He'd come to school high or drunk and we would send him home. Nice kid, always respectful and just had a good soul. One day he was all sorts of messed up and I pulled him out of class. I told him that I loved him and I was worried, and if he kept this up he would more than likely be dead by 30. He freaked out and ran to the principal's office and complained that I had just told him that I loved him and cared about him. Principal said, well, maybe he loves you and cares about you. We kicked him out of school after we had to. He got sober. He came back to track me down. He grabbed me and started sobbing. He said when I said I loved him it was the first time an adult had said that to him, and he believed it. He has stayed sober for years, went to college, and is doing really well as a nurse now. You saved that kid's life. Enough to make a grown man cry. One of my students told me as a child she wanted to grow up to be a strawberry and then cried when she realized she couldn't because she was a human being. Very sweet girl. A good mate of mine had the following interaction with his daughter while I was chilling in his house. Daughter, when I grow up, can I marry a boy? Dad, yep, when you're old enough. Daughter, can I marry a girl? Dad, yep, when you're old enough. Daughter, can I marry Soup? Dad, no. Daughter runs off crying. My mate just looks at me and says in utter confusion she doesn't even like Soup. Very sweet girl. Fix that for you. Big Mike. I'm a HS science teacher in an affluent suburb. We get this transfer kid in who is about 6 feet 8 inches, 350, long thin Hulk Hogan mullet, not bald though, and big glasses. Mike hailed from the hollows of Kentucky, thick southern accent, and was the most quotable kid I ever met. I hate books, Mr. XXXXX, they piss me off. My grandma made me sleep on the porch because she cooked some veggies and I told her, dang it woman, where's the meat? I ain't never seen a pencil like this. Can I keep this and show my dad? Talking about a regular mechanical pencil. They threw me out of Golden Corral because I ate 8 of them steaks they had. I was pissed. Next time I'm trying for 9. and we were supposed to have a fire drill at like 1:55 or some odd time. At 1:57 he went ahead and pulled it, honest to God, thinking he would help out whoever forgot. Last one killed me. Legit one of my favorite students ever. Kid was a C/D student, but damn if he wasn't the funniest kid to have in class. I'll never forget another science teacher the next year running into my room to tell me he said it. I thought you were embellishing, but Big Mike told me he hates books and they piss him off. LOL. I've had many students that are still taking a large place in my heart. Some are sad, like the girl whose mother started beating her during a parent conference. I started crying and begged the mother to stop. The student who had no water or electricity at home, but we allowed him to shower at school and we washed his clothes. The student who watched his grandparents get murdered by his mother and wrote about it in an essay for my class. The student who had never been in a lake that we took camping. He was so excited but didn't know how to swim, so he just stood in the water up to his neck and grinned. Lovely. The girl with terrible anxiety that I sat with for hours after school to work on schoolwork. Not because she wasn't smart, but because she was so anxious about not being perfect. The girl who was mauled by a dog, which messed up her face, but she always smiled. The girl whose father brought her to school every day late, who finally broke down and told me her father was raping her every day when the mother left to go to work. To the Vietnamese and Cambodian refugees who flooded my school after the war. One wrote an essay about running towards a boat and seeing his grandfather get shot, but he had to keep running. The Brazilian boy who got up in class and got me to start dancing with him while we all laughed joyfully. The group of students I took outside during their first snowstorm. The wonder on their faces was priceless. The student who found me on Facebook after 20 years to tell me I made a difference in her life. She came to my state and took me to dinner and told me I was there for her when her home life was terrible. I had no idea. I'm just kind to everyone. I have a million more stories. I have loved every student and being able to teach has been an honor. Edit. My goodness. I am moved to tears by the comments. Especially the thanks. Thank you for reminding me how much value my life has held. You need to write a book and title it something like The Things They Don't Tell You About When You're a Teacher. This right here. I can't imagine how much shit you see. Neither do I want to. I teach at a prison. The first inmate I had graduate under my teaching cried when he looked at his diploma. He was the first in his entire family to graduate. It was quite the accomplishment and I was very moved. Edit. Thanks for all the awards. I taught GED classes in a local prison to the men's SAP program. These weren't violent offenders. They were just addicts that got caught up. Totally the most rewarding position I have ever had in education. Seeing those men get their GED was incredible. One old man. He was a carny that traveled the US his entire adult life. Never made it past 8th grade. Got his GED right before the virus shut everything down. He came and found me in my classroom and hugged me like a brother and thanked me. I still remember his full name. He made that much of an impression on me. He was due to get released a few weeks later. I really hope he's doing well. I worked at a community college as a tutor and helped a lot of adults. It was really rewarding seeing one of my tutoring students go from the point where they struggled to write a complete paragraph, trying to finish their GED, and then 4 years later they are asking me to help read over their application to a master's program. I had a 7th grader that was the biggest, happiest doofus. He actually was pretty intelligent, but he was such an open book and didn't put much effort into school that he came across as a bit of a fool. Other teachers treated him like a nuisance because he definitely was a distraction to other kids. He didn't try to be disruptive, he just was. But he lit up the room with positive energy and was genuinely happy to enjoy every moment of being alive. I didn't understand how his prior teachers were annoyed by him because he genuinely was a ray of sunshine and he made everyone a little happier by being in his presence. He was always smiling, always entertained by life, and it was contagious. Kind of like a human golden retriever. I helped him learn how to set school-related goals for himself and take more of an interest in the things we studied. And he was so proud of earning his first A in my class. The reason I will never forget him is because I wasn't yet a mother when I taught him. And I decided then that if I ever have kids, I hope they will be as happy as Oscar is. I would try to encourage their sense of wonder and fun, above all else. I swore you were talking about me until you said he got an A in my class. Same ha 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 ha. I had a junior, 16 years old, in my high school science course last year peel a strip of metal off the side of a ruler and proceed to stick each end of it into an outlet and shock himself. I saw the sparks out of the corner of my eye and he jumped up and his arm was in some significant pain. He said he did it because he wanted to see what would happen. Scientific method in action, I guess. I will never forget that Dumbus edited to shock because he didn't actually die. Thanks for the heads up. Sounds like someone with a curious nature. Teenagers often end up doing dumb stuff if not given a way to express themselves constructively, so it's super important to find them an appropriate outlet. Haha, outlet. The one who told me, "You really make me think." We are friends to this day and have the best conversations. It's the highest compliment for a teacher. I remember when I got your class is fun because you teach us how to think. The kids were talking about all of their classes and it was sort of a throwaway comment, because they were talking mostly about the classes that frustrated them. It was 11th grade IB. It was the nicest compliment, even though he didn't mean it as one. In 9th grade, I hated history class and really didn't want to study it too hard. It was boring to me and difficult. I had the option to take regular history or join the AP class and I remember being on the fence about it. But because I knew the teacher who taught AP US history, I decided to give it a try. In his class he often taught us that history isn't about memorizing dates and names and events. It's learning how to make connections. He helped me see that what happened in the past wasn't done and over but very much still alive and connected to what's going on in the world today. Even if we struggle to see it that way, we can't predict what's going to happen based on history, but we can use it to inform our decisions today in an effort to influence what may happen tomorrow. I managed to get a 4 out of 5 on my APUSH exam and 5 out of 5 on the Euro exam only because my teacher made history something I wanted to learn about. I was a water sports instructor teaching people kayaking and canoeing a couple years back. There was a group of refugees, all minors between 11 and 17, that came to us through a charity that was supporting them gaining asylum in my country, UK. All of them had crossed the channel on a raft or dinghy literally 2 days before, and for some goddamn reason the charity had decided it was a good time to take them canoeing. Can't make this shit up. There was this one kid from South Sudan, 15 years old and an absolute behemoth. We're talking 6 foot plus and pushing 14-15 stone in weight, covered in scars, some of them ritualistic scarification, missing teeth and generally just looking like he'd been through hell many times. He was terrified of the water. I took him in my boat, nice and easy. Then once he got comfortable I just stuck a stern rudder in and let him power us through the water. Him and the other kids loved it. We had some tears at the beginning. I imagine there was a lot of PTSD involved judging by the state of some of these poor kids. At the end of the session, this giant monster of a child walked up to me with a huge jagged grin, said in broken English, "Thank you leader," and gave me a bear hug I'll never forget. To this day, 4 years later, I still remember that grin. Edit. Water. Sports. In the water. With boats. Not PP. For those out of the UK, 14-15 stone is 89.95 kilograms in normal units, 196-210 pounds in freedom units, and 418-448 Big Macs in Murican. Edit. For everyone commenting on freedom units, it's not my term. It's got its own entry on Urban Dictionary and everything. Yes, I'm a self-hating American. This guy has the numbers. People. Not a teacher, but in my 5th grade math class when my teacher called my name on the first day of school, she paused, lowered her glasses and asked, "Are you?" My uncle's name is Son. I said no, and she gave a huge sigh of relief and said, "Oh thank God." This was over 20 years after she had my uncle as a student. I told my dad about that later that day and he laughed and said my uncle was quite a terror in elementary school. Off topic a bit, but I went to the same grade school as my uncle did. He was 17 when I was born. I got my notice that my 3rd grade teacher would be Mrs. B. My uncle had her and convinced me she was mean and beat the students so much that she was called B the Beater. I was terrified. She was the sweetest teacher ever. And of course 8-year-old me told her what my uncle said and she laughed. Full name edited to protect others. I had the exact opposite experience. When I was in 4th class, which I think is 4th or 5th grade IDK. I was 10. I had a teacher who had taught my aunt some 25 years before. You'll love her. She told me, as this teacher had been her favorite in primary school. This woman made my life hell all year. She just did not like me for whatever reason. I'm still salty about that teacher's treatment of me and others in my class nearly 15 years later. Thank you for sharing this. How special. You are a remarkable teacher and person. I believe Wendy thrived because of you. Thank you for changing the life of someone who needed an advocate in her corner. Thank you. Your story made me cry so much. A wonderful young man who was killed in a car accident back on early the 20th of June 20. He was in his grade 11 year. Took him under my wing in grade 9. Worked on his impulsive behavior, colorful language, anger management and questionable life choices. By grade 10, he was a mentor to incoming grade 9s that had similar issues as himself. In grade 11, he was a leader here in the school, volunteering, joined the arts community and held down 2 after-school jobs. We shook hands every day. He'd bring me coffee. His last text to me said, "Life is beautiful, man," and he had recently told me that he wished that I was his dad. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt coming home from one of those jobs. He was killed instantly after being ejected from a car he was a passenger in. My commute to and from work every day passes by the exact spot he was killed. Miss you, Edward. Out of all the posts I read on this Ask Reddit, this one hits home because it's so real and actually made me tear up. R.I.P. Edward. I'm a professor and I had a student who was a big dude. Much older than the typical college student, like maybe 40, ex-military, and very stoic. We did a simulation exercise during class where students had to make a decision about whether to race a car or withdraw from the race. Most students go forward with the race for a variety of reasons. But what they don't know is that this situation mirrors the decision that NASA made with the Challenger launch, which obviously exploded. After the exercise, the student came up to me and started crying and said it was the most impactful exercise he's ever done, and that when I have hard days I should remember that I made a difference for him. I almost started crying myself. It was a great moment in my career. What was the exercise? I'm really curious. I had a teacher in high school that did an exercise about the ASU people who used racks as transportation and explained a lot of their norms and beliefs about them. We thought they were stupid. Then he said that ASU equals USA and RACE equals car. Then we thought we were stupid. My absolutely favorite reading I had in an anthropology course was about the Nasarama and their daily cleansing rituals and their in-home shrines dedicated to the purpose. This was real paper that was presented at a real anthropology conference, and afterwards quite a few scientists came up and asked how the Nasarama people were doing in various aspects. It completely went over their head that the Nasarama was literally American spelled backwards, and the whole entire thing was just describing our bathroom habits. It was an exercise in how anthropology speak could make a culture entirely unrecognizable, even to itself. So Madison, who had a beautiful smile. A few years after graduation she was murdered by her boyfriend, a classmate of hers. This shattered me. Tony, who had ADD and I, seated right in front of me. He made me crazy and charmed his way into my heart both at the same time. He liked my class but not science, and that was fine. Travis, who was a nice kid in school but is now a real leader in his community. Stephanie, who pursued a career in chemistry and said it was because I inspired her. Sarah, who called me the night she was suicidal. She's now 1 semester from being a social worker. Dustin, from my first year, who was living on his own and needed lunch money half the time. He's a dad and husband now and doing great. Haley, who put a ton of pressure on herself and was in tears in my class after school. A couple conversations with her dad later and I think maybe a family crisis was averted. She's with the Peace Corps now. Bill, who did as much as needed to make a C in my class, and no more, who has a PhD in mathematics and is a data scientist. He was bored. M, whose name is distinct so I'm only using his initial, blew off school from January to March for unknown reasons. Kicked it into high gear for the last quarter and final, but still ended with a 59. F. It cost me nothing to nudge that to a 60 so he could have the credit and graduate. He knew and thanked me. Kid's doing well now. Justin, who had a major falling out with the journalism teacher and couldn't get anybody to listen to his side of things. He TA'd for me during that double period after dropping her class. He's a dad and successful reporter. Super nice guy. It's not that these are any more or less remarkable than anyone else. We just forged a relationship and I'm so grateful to have shared a small bit of their lives. The thing I miss most about being in the classroom is the kids. Sounds like overall, the kids are alright. Yep. Teaching ESL in Taiwan, I joked with a young student and told him I was hungry. Not knowing I speak Chinese, he responded with Kai da bien, which translates to each tea. And what did you say back to him? I eat pieces of shit like you for breakfast. The goodie teach English as a foreign language and had a class of middle school students who needed to use sequential words. First, next, then, etc. to describe making something as part of their end of book test. Most students use the example presented in the book on how to make a sandwich. Some were creative and write about how to make a hamburger instead. One boy raised his hand and asked if he could write about a computer game. As long as you follow the instructions, I don't mind. 10 minutes later he asked for a blank sheet of paper. Whereas everyone else answered the question with 4 or 5 short sentences, this particular student wrote 2.5 pages on how to make a house in Minecraft, creating tools, assembling material, avoiding enemies, etc. One of the most impressive things I've seen from students at that level. The Bada boy who couldn't seem to keep his hands to himself. He would occasionally punch other boys in the arm, flick girls in the head. And eventually I had to deal with one of the other boys in class raising his hand to inform me that this particular student was grabbing his chili pepper, open bracket. Chili pepper slash is a Korean euphemism for penis. The troublemaker was eventually kicked out, but not before his mother came to complain that her son was an angel and I was obviously making everything up. The widow 5th grade girl joined my class and on her very first day, after everyone else had left, walked up to me and slid a folded up piece of paper across my desk. Teacher, this is my phone number. Call me anytime. The weird, I wonder if that poor unfortunate child was being trafficked. Yes, 5th grade is not too young for victims of trafficking. There are some really sick folks out there. It might have been a call request for help, but she wasn't sure how to ask or was afraid to outright ask. I know this may be the case, but to keep myself from getting depressed, I'm just gonna imagine she was just a little girl who wanted to be a therapist and wanted to start getting experience in. Joseph. I taught, read, tried to teach Joseph science for 2 years, so I wasn't exactly blind to his limitations. But he really did surprise me when we began our unit on the universe. We watched a short video about the life of a star and then I led the class discussion and we talked about our sun and how small our solar system is and all of that fun stuff. At some point it dawned on Joseph that the sun is a star and would go through a life cycle like any other star does. And he starts to lose his ducking mind. Open bracket. It's not much going on up there though, so I am not too worried about long-term effects. He suddenly has so many questions. Wait, so we're gonna get burned alive? How much time do we have? How come nobody has said anything about this before? And this isn't like when middle schoolers ask dumb questions for attention. This kid is ducking, grabbing his hair and squirming in his seat, totally scared. So I go, no, Joseph, this isn't going to happen for a long time. We won't be here by then, which does not help the situation. All that poor kid was doing was minding his business and doing the least academically up until now. I threw his entire existence in his face. Accidentally. I'm not a monster. And he had to take a minute outside in the hall to figure shit out after that. Joseph did not pass the 8th grade that year. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.